Her name was Renata, though for most of the hearing the room only called her the daughter, as if that were an accusation in itself. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, and from a few rows back it would have looked like composure. It wasn't. It was the particular stillness of someone who has run out of things to do with her body. Her mother, Carol, sat at the plaintiff's table in a blazer Renata didn't recognize, and beside her, half a step behind like a second lawyer, was Renata's sister Dana, wearing an expression that had settled into place before the hearing even started. It had taken 11 months to get here. 11 months since Carol filed the petition alleging that Renata, as trustee of their late father's modest estate account, had misappropriated funds. The number named was $41,300. Renata remembered reading it the first time and feeling nothing recognizable as anger. More like the floor tilting a few degrees, just enough that she had to put a hand on the counter. She had managed that account for 6 years. Nobody had asked her to. Exactly. It had simply become hers the way certain jobs become someone's without a conversation. Her father's illness, then his death, then the paperwork nobody else wanted to touch. She'd paid the property taxes on the house Carol still lived in. She'd handled the transfer when Dana needed help with a down payment quietly, without telling anyone it had come out of trust funds meant for all three of them eventually. She hadn't asked for thanks. She also hadn't expected this. The attorney representing Carol, a compact man named Fenwick, stood and began with the kind of confidence that made Renata briefly doubt her own memory. He described a pattern of withdrawals, cash advances, transfers to accounts he called unverified. He used the word pattern 4 times in the first 6 minutes. At one point, Carol turned in her chair, found Renata's eyes across the room, and said, loud enough that the bailiff took a step forward, "She's a dirty thief. Check her accounts." The judge, a woman named Alvarez, who had not raised her voice once in 90 minutes, said only, "Ma'am, please address me, not the respondent." And Carol sat back down, breathing hard, satisfied in the way people are satisfied. When they finally said the thing they came to say, Renata didn't answer. She had learned, somewhere in the last decade of being handed responsibility without being handed trust, that answering rarely changed anything. What changed things, if anything did, was time and paperwork, and she had brought both. 6 years of statements, receipts, a spreadsheet she'd updated every quarter out of habit more than diligence. Her own attorney, a younger woman named Priya, who had taken the case almost as a favor, had barely spoken. She didn't need to yet. Fenwick slid a stack of papers across the table toward the bench, thick and tabbed, the kind of exhibit meant to look exhaustive. "Your Honor, we'd like to direct attention to the account activity beginning in March of last year, which shows a consistent pattern of cash withdrawals inconsistent with the respondent's stated expenses." Judge Alvarez took the stack without comment and began turning pages with the unhurried rhythm of someone who had read 10,000 exhibits before this one. Renata watched her mother's shoulders, upright and certain. She watched Dana check her phone under the table, already bored, already sure of the outcome. The room did the thing rooms do when nothing is happening. It got smaller, the air thinner, everyone's attention narrowing to the sound of pages turning. Then the judge stopped. She didn't announce it. She simply stopped turning, tapped the page once with the end of her pen, read something to herself, and then read it again. When she looked up, her expression hadn't changed, which somehow made it worse. "Mr. Fenwick," she said, "this statement, the one dated March 14th, showing the $8,200 withdrawal you're attributing to the respondent, whose signature authorized this transaction." Fenwick glanced down at his own copy, and Renata watched something small happen in his face, a recalibration. That would be, he started, then stopped, then flipped back a page, then forward again. "I'll read it for the record," the judge said, and did. The authorization line carried an account holder's signature, not Renata's. Carol's own. The room didn't gasp. Courtrooms rarely do what courtrooms do in movies. What happened instead was quieter and worse, a kind of collective recalculation. Heads turning not toward Renata but toward the exhibit itself, as though the paper had betrayed someone. "Your Honor, that withdrawal was..." Carol started, half rising, and her own attorney put a hand lightly on her arm. "I'd like a recess to review this with my client," Fenwick said. The judge granted it. 15 minutes. Renata sat through them without moving, watching her mother and Fenwick huddle at the far table, Carol's hands moving in short, defensive gestures, Dana no longer looking at her phone. When the hearing resumed, Fenwick's confidence had thinned into something more careful. He did not withdraw the petition. That would come later, in a filing 2 weeks after, quietly, without ceremony. What he did instead was ask for a continuance, and the judge granted that too, and set a new date, and that was the whole of it. No verdict, no vindication read aloud, just a recess, a new date on a calendar, and $8,200 that had never come from Renata's hands at all. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Dana caught up to her And for a second, Renata thought there might be something. An apology, an acknowledgement, even just a look that admitted what had almost happened. Instead, Dana said, Mom's going to need help sorting this out, you know. The account stuff. It's confusing for her. Renata looked at her sister for a long moment. It wasn't confusing today, she said, and that was all. She didn't feel triumphant walking to her car. She felt the particular exhaustion of having been proven right about something she'd never wanted to be right about. That the people who called her untrustworthy had never actually looked at the accounts they accused her of stealing from. She thought about the years of quiet management, the invisible labor, the assumption that competence was owed rather than given. She didn't know yet if she'd go to Thanksgiving. She didn't know if Carol would ever say the word, sorry, or if the recess would harden into something permanent between them. The kind of distance families don't name, but simply live inside. What she knew, starting the engine, was smaller and less satisfying than victory. She knew what was true. For now, that was the only thing she was willing to hold on to.